What's up, YouTube? Bishop Barano TV coming to y'all another video today. We're going to jump straight into the video. The truth about trucking in 2025. This is for my new drivers, people who've been driving, and people who are thinking about getting into trucking and they're just doing their research about it. I'm going to give you the truth. Number one is you're going to miss holidays. You're going to miss time away from your family, time away from your friends. You're just going to miss being there for your family. What I mean by that is you're going to miss Christmases, Thanksgivings, holidays, birthdays, first day of schools, Father's Day, Mother's Day, Labor Day. You're going to miss all these holidays. Sometimes, you'll get home, but for the most part, you're going to miss major holidays. And, you just got to be able to accept that, I've been driving 5-6 years. I missed Thanksgiving. I missed 4th of July. I missed Easters. I missed some major holidays. And it's going to, miss you mentally. You just got to be able, to handle that. You're going to miss time, from your family, from your girlfriend, your wife, boyfriend, husband, your spouses. You're gonna miss time from your kids. There's gonna be times where you're gonna be out 2 or 3 weeks, and you're gonna be laying, take your reset in Washington, in Florida, Virginia, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. So you just gotta be able to deal with that. Missing holidays, missing major, events. Like, just get disconnected from the real world. Miss time with your friends. You're not gonna be able to just go chill with the guys on a Saturday. You're not gonna be able to barbecue on a Sunday with your family. You're gonna get disconnected from your friends, and that's just a part of trucking. You're gonna miss holidays. You're gonna miss holidays. Not every holiday. You're gonna miss some holidays. You're not gonna, it's a part of the game. Even if you're local, you may have to work holidays. Some companies you may work Tuesday through Saturday. The holiday may fall on a Saturday. You may miss that. So you're still missing holidays, even if you're home every day. You work 12 hours local, you're still gonna have to work holidays. Number two, this job isn't like a traditional 9 to 5. You're gonna be working 12 to 14 hours pretty much every day. 9 to 5, you work 40 hours a week, you go home. You have time to have a life. You have time for hobbies. You have time to go bowling, fishing, play basketball, lift weights. Be there with your kids or your significant other. Trucking over the road, it's 12 hours. Like, think about it like this. You got an appointment time at 8 p.m. You're not gonna get loaded for at least 2 hours. You're gonna be in a dock for maybe, you gotta check in, they gotta find your door. That's about 30 minutes, and then it'll probably take 2 hours, to get unloaded. That's another 2-3 hours. You pull up to Walmart, Kroger, Costco, these Sam's Clubs. You pull up to these DCs, reefer DCs, these restaurants, these food places, Target, like Amazon. You're gonna be there for like 5 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, and you still got your clock. You still gotta drive to the delivery. You still have to drive to your next pickup once you get unloaded. Yeah, you're gonna be, your drive time was 11 hours, 30-minute break. That's, you got 14 in your clock. So these loads are based for you to run your whole clock. So, you're gonna be working 12, 13, 14-hour days, every day. And that's just trucking. Like, it's a 12-hour day minimum. It's a 13-hour day minimum. If you're doing short runs, cool. But for the majority, over the road, new drivers, rookie drivers, is 12 hours, 13 hours, 11 hours, 10 hours. That's number two. Number three is the pay. over-the-road trucking, regional trucking, you're gonna have to deal with the pay. Trucking is very unpredictable. Trucking, you're basically depending on you having a good week in trucking. You make your money from miles, running 3,000, 3,500, 2,000 miles a week, doing 3 or 4 loads a week. Hey, trucking, a blowout, breakdowns, a slow week, bad area, that's gonna affect your pay. Like, well, you may have a check that's $1,000, $800, $700, $600 in 1 week. You still have bills, you have kids, you have rent, stuff like that. You gotta take care of yourself. You might got personal bills for yourself, stuff like that. Trucking is very unpredictable. You may be sick, hospital, stuff like that. It's very unpredictable. Like with a 9 to 5, hey, I'm in this office, I'm working, 40 hours a week. I'm working 40 hours a week. I'm gonna get paid this every single week. Trucking, you may have 2 good weeks and 3 bad weeks. You may have 4 good weeks and 2 bad weeks. You may have 2 good weeks, 2 bad weeks. You may have, a week where you stuck in a hotel for 3 days. Of course, you're gonna get breakdown pay, but it's not the same as you running 3,000 miles. You're not gonna run 3,000 miles every single week. Trucking is never that sweet. Stuff happens. You might get stuck in Florida for 2 days, and on the weekends, that's when you do your 34, or you pull in to a city and the deliveries for Monday, but you still got the weekend. Business is closed on the weekends, so trucking is very up and down. To be mindful of that. Don't get into trucking thinking like, oh, nothing's gonna happen. Everything's gonna be fine and dandy. I'm going, to run my 3,000 miles every week. That's not how trucking works. That's not how life works. Number 4, dealing with bad companies, bad trucking companies. Just think about it like this. You're a new driver. You don't have much experience. You're gonna have to, dug it out with a company, for at least a year. So, you may have to deal with bad management, bad dispatcher, very low pay starting out, 40 cents a mile, 50 cents a mile. You may not be getting paid on time. They may be taking money out your check. Stuff like that, bad equipment. This is trucking. You're gonna have to deal with that. All those companies in Chicago, I know y'all hear about those stories. They didn't get paid. Friday came, there was no paycheck. Bad equipment. They want the drivers to drive over their clock. They want them to run 2 clocks. You gotta deal with a lot of bad companies in trucking. Once starting out, once you get 2 or 3 years, you can go with a better company, like reputable companies. But just dealing with companies. That's number 4. And number 5, probably the last one, is dealing with your mental and physical health in trucking. Your mental health. You're away from your family. You can't be there on the dot. Like you're gonna be somewhere in Oregon or Wyoming, and your family is wherever you're at home. An emergency happens, you can't just be there right then and there. Of course, you can take a flight, you can drive back in 2 days, but you're not there. You can send money, but it's not the same like actually physically being there for your family. You're gonna lose friends. That stuff's gonna deal with your mental health. Trucking is very depressing. Just being in the truck all the time is very depressing. Just being on the road, driving, constantly thinking. It's very depressing. That's your mental health. That's your mental health. It's very, and then number 2, your physical health. Truck stop food, sitting 11, 12 hours, 8, 9 hours constantly, eating, sleeping. You're not getting much activity, much physical activity. So, that's your physical health. that's the truth about trucking. It's very hard to say I'm gonna work out, I'm gonna eat healthy. I mean, starting out, you know, we're just getting the hang of things. So trucking is very draining. It's a very draining job. You know, you're gonna work 12, 13 hours. You're gonna be away from your family. You're gonna miss holidays. You're gonna deal with bad companies. You know, you're gonna deal with fluctuating paychecks. You know, you may have a good paycheck, bad paycheck. You know, you may have to deal with, you know, not getting paid on time. You gotta deal with, you know, not getting your last paycheck. You know, you gotta deal with, you know, your truck breakdown. You may gotta pay for your own hotels, or you know, something wrong with the truck. You know, you may gotta pay for your own flight, pay for your own way back home. You know, you're gonna have to deal with stuff like that in trucking. You know, just be ready for that. Be mindful. You know, trucking is just a stepping stone for, you know, what people really want to do. Trucking is a tool. You know, create financial freedom, buy houses, pay houses off, be your own boss. You know, with owner operator, have a little bit of freedom in trucking versus, you know, the traditional 9 to 5. You know, drive when you want to. You know, no uniforms. You know, be you. You know, trucking, you know, it's a great career, but it's very challenging. It's very draining, and you just gotta be ready for that. You know, if you're not mentally tough for this, you know, it may not be for you. But that's the truth about trucking. You know, being away from your family, long hours, the pay, bad companies, mental and physical health, emotional health. You know, people got kids at home, people got spouses at home. You know, your trust issues, dealing with that, you know. Just be mindful of that. That's the video for today. Like, comment, subscribe, share. The truth about trucking in 2025. That is the truth about trucking. I'm out.